Right. I hope that didn't hurt your ears too much online. So just being here in your body, really here in this moment with your own lived experience, that alone isn't a small thing. The Buddha's teachings never asked us to be any different than we are, only to be present for what is here. And so today we're exploring what I've come to think of as the very tender balance, the balance between dukkha and sukha. Or said more simply, the balance between the stress or tightness that arises in life and the possibility of ease, of well-being, of softness inside the very same life. And so I'll attempt to define both words and tell a few stories, give a few quotes from other teachers and monastics, and help you see this tender balance of the two as a way of living one's life fully with ease, and by offering brief meditations. And we'll have a longer meditation at the end of the talk, and we'll have a short discussion. Dukkha is an old Pali word, the language spoken at the time of the Buddha, that gets translated in many ways. Suffering, dissatisfaction, stress, discomfort, the sense that life rubs just a little bit the wrong way. It doesn't necessarily mean catastrophe. Often it's subtle, the tightening before a difficult conversation, the press of expectation, the hunger for things to be different, the small ache of not quite enough. The Buddha named dukkha not as a flaw in us, but as something inherent in being alive. If you breathe, all beings know dukkha. And we can also know something else. We can know sukha, the felt sense of ease, a softness in the mind, a spaciousness in the heart, the quiet sweetness that appears when nothing needs to be different in this moment. The ease that comes from not escaping life, but from relaxing our grip on it. The Buddha never said that life was about getting rid of dukkha so we could have sukha instead. He never framed this as a competition between the two. What he taught was that both are part of the human experience, and that freedom comes from learning how to meet dukkha so that sukha has space to appear. This is where it becomes personal, where dukkha appears in an ordinary human life. Let me tell you a story that I had around a difficulty with a friend. It was nothing dramatic, just the kind of moment that happens to most of us. There was a time when someone I cared about had said something sharp to me, not cruel, not unforgivable, just sharp. You know, those comments that land in the body faster than the mind can interpret them. Mm-hmm. My chest tightened, my jaw got tight, my breath got just a little bit shorter. And underneath it all, this quiet, familiar voice said, I need to defend myself. In that moment of tightening, that's dukkha. Before the argument, before the story, before any dukkha is already present. The contraction is the suffering. Most of us only notice the suffering later, when we're replaying things in our heads, wishing we could have responded differently. But the Buddha invites us to notice the very first tightening, to recognize, this is dukkha, not as judgment, not as failure, but simply as truth. So I'd like to approach how understanding dukkha reflects the Buddha's radical honesty. When the Buddha began teaching after his awakening, he started with something we all well know, dukkha. The Pali word translated often as suffering, but it's richer than that. Dukkha means unease, stress, dissatisfaction, the subtle sense that something is off, incomplete, or unreliable in our experience. The Buddha said in one of his very long and hard to pronounce suttas, or sutta is another word for teachings. This one's Dhammacakkappavattana, and it's a very well-known quote. Birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, death is dukkha, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Association with the unpleasant is dukkha. Separation from the pleasant is dukkha. Not getting what one wants is dukkha. In brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are dukkha. It's quite a comprehensive list, but also compassionate. It names the full range of human vulnerability. And dukkha isn't just about pain, it points to a subtle instability built into experience itself. The feeling that life never quite holds still long enough for us to rest. I suspect you can relate to that. I certainly can. Dukkha has been described not as a flaw in life, but as a mismatch between our desires and the impermanent nature of things. Bhikkhu Analayo, a well-known monk and teacher, says it's not the world that disappoints us, but the mind's insistence that it should be otherwise. In the Sala Sutta, the Buddha describes this so beautifully. He says that when an untrained mind experiences pain, it's like being struck by 2 arrows. The first arrow is the pain itself. The second arrow is the reaction, the tightening, the resistance, the struggle. The first arrow is unavoidable. We're human beings. We feel. But the second arrow, the contraction, is optional. It is conditioned due to circumstances that arise, yes, but it's not inevitable. And here is where the possibility of Sukha appears. With that friend that I mentioned, I took a deep breath, not a big dramatic deep breath, just a small, ordinary breath that allowed me to notice, oh, something in me is hurting. And in that noticing, the contraction loosened just a little. I didn't fix anything. I didn't become wiser or enlightened. I simply allowed the moment to be seen. When we see dukkha clearly with kindness, something else becomes possible. We create just enough space for the heart not to collapse. This is where the Buddha's teachings are almost startlingly gentle. He didn't say that we must immediately transform pain into joy. He simply said, know it. In the very well-known Satipatthana Sutta, which is the 4 stages of breathing and mindfulness, know the tightening, know the ache, know the moment of holding. Just know it. The direct experience of knowing. The knowing is the turning. There's a tender balance between dukkha and sukha. Suffering may still visit, but ease becomes available when we stop fighting the present moment. The first noble truth there is dukkha. Not life is only suffering, but this is a part of being human. We tense, we cling, we fear loss, we grasp at moments that we love. We try to fix or protect or control the heart. And every time we feel ourselves narrow, constrict, and tighten, Dukkha is the moment that the heart forgets that it's allowed to soften. Sukha is the remembering. And what actually softens the heart? When we talk about Sukha, we're not talking about happiness as the world defines it, not pleasure, not achievement, not conditions being favorable. Sukha is what arises when the heart remembers that it does not need to be defended in this moment. Ajahn Sumedho often says, let the heart be receptive, not as something you do, but as something you allow. We can't manufacture Sukha. Sukha appears when the mind stops pushing away experience. And this is incredibly hopeful because it means Sukha is not somewhere else. It's not something we earn. It's not reserved for monks or retreats or perfect meditators. It's here and now, waiting for space. Our practice is not to create Sukha. Our practice is to stop interfering with it. In my own life, one of the clearest lessons came during a time when someone I loved deeply began to change in ways that I couldn't control. I kept trying to hold on to the version of them that I missed. That one that made me feel safe and known. The more I clung, the more painful it became. And during that period, a friend gently reminded me of a line from the Dhammapada, verse 277. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. It wasn't that my sadness disappeared. It was that I finally saw its cause. I was holding on to my suffering, and I was holding on to what could not stay. Ajahn Sumedho once said, suffering is not a mistake, it's an invitation. That line always makes me pause. We tend to think of suffering as something to fix, but the Buddha treated it as a teacher. Dukkha is not something to get rid of, but something to understand. When we understand it, we're no longer caught by it. So let's take a pause just for a moment before I go further. And just with your eyes opened or closed, just feel your body seated. Feel your breath however it is. The face, the shoulders, the belly. If there's tightening, just notice it. If there is ease, notice that too. No change required. This is the doorway. Okay, let's go on. We learn to walk with dukkha gently. When we begin to see dukkha clearly, something very tender opens. Again, the Buddha never said life is suffering. He said dukkha exists. It arises. It passes. It can be known. And it can be responded to with wisdom and compassion. This is extremely important because the modern mind tends to interpret difficulty as failure. We think if I were practicing well enough, I wouldn't feel anxious, or if I were really mindful, my relationships wouldn't be complicated, or even if I were truly spiritual, I would be above all of this. But the Buddha didn't promise a life free from difficulty. He promised the possibility of meeting difficulty with freedom. In one of the passages from the Pali Canon, which is the book of knowledge, several of them created right after writing was beginning, and they were recording things on leaves before it got put into actual books from the translations of those who remember the Buddha's teachings. All is a flame. The I is a flame. Forms are a flame. Contact is a flame. With the fire of passion, the fire of aversion, the fire of delusion, a flame with birth, aging, and death, with sorrows, lamentations, pain, distresses, and despairs. This metaphor of dukkha as combustion or being on fire intensifies the sense of existential unrest and danger. And in that same first discourse, the Buddha offers this insight for practice. Dukkha should be known. The cause by which dukkha comes into play should be known. The cessation of dukkha should be known. The path of practice for the cessation of dukkha should be known. This was his first teaching. This clearly frames dukkha as a diagnosis. One must first see, experience, or understand dukkha, know it, and then perceive its cause and its cessation and the path to liberation. Ajahn Sumedho says it beautifully. Suffering is not a personal fault. It is simply something that can be understood. When we really let that in, the heart softens. There's no enemy. Just experience unfolding. So let's talk about the nature of Sukha. It's not pleasure, but it's ease. Sukha is not excitement. It's not delight. It's not a peak experience. Sukha is the quality of inner ease that arises when the heart is no longer fighting its experience. Now, Sukha, often translated as happiness or ease, is not the fleeting pleasure of pleasant experiences. The Buddha pointed to a deeper kind of joy that arises when the mind is steady, clear, and kind. In the Metta Sutta, you've often repeated this probably if you've been around me for long, the Buddha describes the heart contented and easily satisfied. This is Sukha born of contentment. The Buddha points to this again and again. And I paraphrase this from one of the suttas. This is a peace that is not born of gaining nor of striving. Sukha is the natural ease of the heart when it's not defended. Sister Ayakema writes, Sukha is the happiness of a heart without resistance. That is why the path is tender. It's not about fixing life. It's about learning how to be with life. How do we cultivate that? There is a gentle, accessible framing that is often a deeper state referred to in the teachings as jhana, which is often described as deep, concentrated meditative states. And I'll say a little more about this later on. But we can also understand jhana as the settling of the heart as it releases struggle. When the mind stops chasing, defending, solving, even briefly, it becomes very quiet. And in that quiet, joy arises naturally. We don't force joy. We allow joy. We don't chase concentration, we stop scattering. Even one mindful breath, fully received, contains the seed of jhana. I'll say that another way. Jhana is not far away. It begins the moment the mind rests in the present with kindness. That is why the Buddha said there is a pleasure that is to be cultivated. Pleasure not of indulgence, but of release. We learn to recognize the moment of tightening and soften around it instead of pushing it away. You might just notice now as you're sitting, when the breath is held, we allow it to release. When the shoulders lift, we let them settle. When the mind starts planning, we pause just for a moment. When emotion appears, we let it be known gently, without needing to manage it. Ayakema, a well-known meditation teacher, described Sukha beautifully as, happiness is not found in getting what we want, but in being free from wanting. Happiness is not found in getting what we want, but in being free from wanting. When I first heard that, I laughed because a friend and I had been talking about her recent retreat. She had just spent a week wanting everything to go her way on retreat. The meals, the temperature, the people around her, all small things became sources of irritation. And then one afternoon, sitting under a tree, she simply got tired of wanting. She let go, not out of virtue, but exhaustion. She said the stillness that followed was astonishing. She could hear the wind move through the leaves, feel the earth cool beneath her. It was simple, steady, joyful. That was Sukha. In meditation, Sukha often appears as a subtle warmth or brightness. In daily life, it might be the calm of a moment when we stop arguing with reality. My teachers often encourage practitioners to enjoy the breath. Joy nourishes concentration, and concentration reveals insight. Sukha is not a distraction, it's a doorway. So let's try a short practice. Just take a moment to sit in a way that your body feels supported. No need to be rigid. Let your posture be both upright and soft. Keep your eyes open, gazing in front of you, or let them close gently, whatever you're comfortable with. And let the breath find you just as it is. No changing, no improving, just receiving. Let the mind rest in the gentle rhythm of breathing. If the body is holding tension, you might silently say, "It's okay. You can soften." If the heart is holding something, a concern, a story, a hope, or a fear, you might offer, "You don't have to solve this right now." Feel the ground supporting you. Feel the breath nourishing you. Let yourself belong to this moment. gently. If dukkha is here, if there is pain, tightness, confusion, just remind yourself this too belongs. Let the breath meet the heart area gently, like the warmth of a hand placed with goodwill. With each exhale, allow a softening, just a little, just enough. Not all at once, not forcing, just the smallest unclenching around experience. There may be moments where the heart softens and then tightens again. This is not a mistake, this is the practice. The heart learns to soften in waves. Let the breath continue to come and go rhythmically, unhurried, patient. Now silently offer to the heart these phrases, not as beliefs, not as concepts, but as gentle invitations. May I soften. May I be held. May I allow things to be as they are. If the phrases feel supportive, stay with them. If they do not, simply return to the breath, to the body, to the quiet presence of being alive. May I be softened. May I soften. May I be held. May I allow things to be as they are. Now together we take 3 slow breaths, inhaling and receiving, exhaling, softening, inhaling, opening, exhaling, releasing, inhaling, belonging, exhaling, resting. And when you're ready, you may gently open the eyes and rest here for a few breaths. When you're ready, slowly return. This simple practice shows that we don't have to chase Sukha or fear, Dukkha. Awareness can hold both. This is the middle way in direct experience. And we can walk with Dukkha in daily life. I found 3 ways to help address Dukkha that are useful to me: awareness, kindness, and letting go. These 3 are not steps that we accomplish. They're more like qualities that we grow familiar with. They're the heart's natural responses when it remembers that it doesn't need to contract. So let's take them one at a time. Awareness, seeing what is here. Awareness is simple but not easy. It's the willingness to turn toward the experience without immediately trying to fix or interpret it. Awareness sounds like, tightness in the chest. Oh, the mind is replaying that conversation before. Or, sadness is here today. Awareness does not say, this shouldn't be happening. I need to figure this out. I am failing. Awareness just sees. There is a moment, sometimes just a second, when we recognize this is suffering. Not as a condemnation, just as a simple truth. That recognition is the doorway. Ajahn Chah said, if you want to understand your mind, sit down and watch it. Then you will see for yourself how it creates suffering. There's no hurry. Awareness moves at the speed of sincerity. The second step is kindness, softening the edges. Once we see our suffering, we usually judge it. We say, I should be over this. Why am I still affected? Other people handle things better. This is where kindness must enter. Kindness is not sentimentality. It's not being nice. Kindness is inner disarmament. It's the willingness to stop attacking yourself. When we really learn to say, oh, this hurts. No wonder I'm reacting. This is hard. May I be gentle with myself. This is the shift from struggle to care. Thich Nhat Hanh teaches, when suffering is recognized and held in kindness, it begins to transform. We don't make the suffering disappear. We stop being at war with ourselves, and that changes everything. The third step, letting go, not pushing away, but just unclenching. Letting go is often misunderstood as don't care, move on, be detached. But the Buddha meant something much more intimate and human. Letting go is naturally what happens when the heart no longer feels threatened. Letting go is not a decision. It's the easing that follows kindness. Like unclenching a hand that had been gripping without realizing it. It might happen slowly, a millimeter at a time. But it happens in its own time. We don't let go by force. We let go by loving what is here enough to stop tightening around it. So let's bring Sukha into this. The gentle happiness that arises when the heart is not in conflict. It's not something that we acquire. It's something we remember. Every time we notice suffering, awareness can be there. We can soften around it with kindness and release the gripping by letting go. the heart returns to its natural ease, even for a moment. That moment is not small. That moment is the entire path. One of my favorite teachers, Sister Ayasan Tusika, who lives in Southern California around Santa Cruz and has a small monastery there. She says, peace is never far. It is just on the other side of letting go. Peace is never far. It's just on the other side of letting go. There's a place along the river trail that I walk where the water moves very slowly, almost still. On warm days, the surface becomes glass, reflecting sky and cottonwood branches so perfectly that it's hard to tell where the world ends and the reflection begins. But just a few bends down the stream, the river gathers speed and the water becomes louder, and it's the same river. Sometimes our hearts are the quiet inlet. Sometimes they're the rushing rapids. And we don't need to fix the river. We walk alongside it. We learn its rhythms. We learn how to listen. The Buddha didn't teach us to control experience. He taught us to be intimate with it. This is the tenderness of the path. This is what makes the practice humane. So how can we cultivate through practice? How can we cultivate Sukha through practice? When the Buddha speaks of quieter states of concentration or jhana, he's not talking about something mystical or reserved for monastics. The Buddha speaks about a natural settling of the mind when it is no longer pushed or pulled by craving. The Pali word jhana means to meditate or to absorb. But the heart of jhana is this. The mind rests in one place long enough for joy and ease to become the natural atmosphere. We don't create joy, we simply stop disturbing the conditions that allow it to appear. How does the mind settle? When we stay with one simple object, the breath, the body, or sitting, or a phrase like here, something begins to shift. At first, the mind wanders, doesn't it? We return gently again and again. Gradually, the body becomes more comfortable. The breath softens, thought quiets. The heart becomes less defensive. It was said in one of the suttas, secluded from sensual craving, one dwells with joy, that's piti, and ease, that's sukha, born of collectedness. Here, piti is a kind of uplifting joy. It's a buoyancy. And sukha is the accompanying contentment, the sweetness of nothing missing. As attention gathers more deeply, thinking continues to slow, and the energetic joy of piti quiets. And what remains is the deep peace of sukha, quiet and steady. So uplifted joy and ease, quiet joy, deeper ease. We don't have to name these when we're practicing, but we can feel the shift. The body can feel like home. The heart is not defensive. The world is not pressing in. This is not escape. This is clarity without struggle. And from this clarity, we begin to see Sukha is not the opposite of dukkha. It is what remains when dukkha softens. There was a period, not dramatic, just quietly painful, where a relationship in my life felt strained. We were both tired, both protecting something unspoken, both convinced that the other did not understand. And every conversation felt like brushing against a bruise. One afternoon, after a particularly tense exchange, I sat down on my cushion And instead of replaying the conversation, I simply felt the ache in my chest. I didn't analyze, I didn't rehearse, I didn't look for resolution. I just stayed with the ache. Gentle breath, warm awareness, softening around the edges. And in that quiet, I could sense this suffering is shared. They hurt too. And they're protecting something fragile too. The heart softened, not because the situation changed, but because the war inside me eased. Later, when we spoke again, I didn't need them to be different. I just needed myself to stay open. That conversation was the first truly kind one that we'd had in a week. Sukha had returned, not because the world aligned, but because I stopped gripping so tightly inside. This is what the practice makes possible. And so integrating Sukha into daily life, the Buddha understood something deeply human. We cannot live in the forest forever. We have jobs, we have families, we get tired, we get hungry, we get annoyed when there are too many meetings and not enough snacks. So the question becomes, how do we carry Sukha into daily life? We do not need long retreats to taste this. We simply shift the tone of our attention. Sukha appears in micro moments of non-resistance. One of the quotes from Ajahn Sumedho that I like is, peace is not something far away. Peace is the space when we stop interfering. Even 30 seconds of ease matters. The heart learns to trust again. The nervous system remembers. The mind becomes less startled by the world. This is the gradual path, the tender path, the human path. A soft heart suffers less. This is one of the profound paradoxes of this practice. The hard heart feels protected, but hurts constantly. The soft heart feels vulnerable, but is actually resilient. Softness is not weakness. Softness is the capacity to stay open without breaking. This is the essence of Sukha. So let's pause this section of my talk for another brief guided meditation. So take a gentle breath in and soften on the exhale. Feel the weight of the body. Noticing where the body meets the ground, allowing it to be supported. Sense the heart area, not forcing anything, just aware. If there is tension, let it be known. If there is softness, let it be known. Let the breath be kind. Say inwardly, softly, this is my experience right now, and I am allowed to be here. If there is tension, let it be known. If there is softness, let it be known. Let the breath be kind. Say inwardly, softly, this is my experience right now, and I'm allowed to be here. Let the heart rest exactly as it is. Two more slow breaths. Or maybe 3 or 4. May the heart remember its own softness. May all beings find ease. When the heart softens even a little, experience becomes more workable. Sukha is not something we achieve, it's something that we uncover by gently releasing our grip on life. The Buddha didn't ask us to be perfect, he asked us to be present, to be kind, to be willing to soften. This is the tender balance, walking with dukkha, awakening to sukha. Holding the heartbreak and the joy in the same open heart. So the tender balance is this, to seek dukkha clearly, to see it clearly, to know it without collapse, and to savor sukha wisely without clinging. When both are understood, we rest in a deeper happiness, the sukha of letting go. And so I think I'll stop here and let's just take a few moments to let the words settle down. Maybe some of the words can be remembered at different times later. Maybe some of them didn't make any sense. You can just let those go. Just pausing and letting the words settle. May we dedicate the merit of our practice. May all beings who struggle with dukkha find the peace of sukha. May our practice reveal the tender balance that leads to freedom. May we meet this life, joys and sorrows alike, with a boundless heart. Thank you for listening to the Dhamma. May you be at ease. remember that the joy in the practice, no matter what's going on in the mind, there is great benefit. That merit will benefit all beings. So we're going to end for now. I'm going to pause the recording.